If you're looking for an easy way to use alcohol markers, I want to show you how I use them specifically because I think you'll be surprised at how simple they can be with this approach. I don't love blending with markers, so when I do these illustrations, I like to keep it simple, like 3 or 4 colors per object, no blending, and then just making sure I intentionally place the colors to create bright and dimensional illustrations. This week I illustrated what's in my makeup bag because I thought it would be a fun exercise, and I love makeup and I love markers, so it's the perfect combination. Towards the end of the video, I'm going to do a summary of all my main tips when doing these types of marker illustrations, so if you want to skip to that, I'll put it in the description box. I always start with a pencil sketch, which lets me get the basic lines and shapes right and make any mistakes if I need to, and then once I'm happy with the sketches, I go over with a fine liner pen. I like that graphical look that the fine line pen gives to the final result, and doing the pen first makes me feel like I'm colouring in my illustrations like a colouring in book, which feels satisfying. I tend to use a 0.5 pen for the main outlines, but you can play around with what thickness feels good to you. And then I erase the pencil, which leaves me with the clean lines. Now onto the colour selection. This is where the magic happens. Pastel colours or really light colours are your best friend when it comes to alcohol marker illustrations. They are perfect for layering and creating depth. So I take some time to select the colours I want and swatch them. You'll see that I swatch more colours than I end up using because I'm trying to determine which one is best. And I'm not necessarily looking for the colour that most looks like the reference. I'm looking for a colour that I can build layers to create texture, so definitely don't get too caught up on finding the perfect color compared to your reference photo. So here I selected the lightest lilac I swatched, and then I complete my first layer. I sped this up because there is literally no technique here apart from coloring in the lines. I do it in small strokes and try to cover all the space with one layer, not saturating the paper and using a light hand. The second layer is where I start to pick out areas on the makeup bag that are in shadow. I'm trying to create depth and texture to the fabric, so I'm filling in the spaces that look darker from my reference, picking out the shapes of the shadows, and always using the same marker, so the same color I did my first layer. If you want crisper shapes when layering the same color, make sure your first layer is fully dry. I didn't wait for the first layer to fully dry, which means the marker bleeds on itself a little bit. Which isn't totally bad, but it's definitely better to wait to keep more definition. With the second more vibrant color, I then go in and pick out some areas to add in a more lilac and deeper hue. This second color brings a more purplish hue to the illustration overall. Then I fill out the pattern of the makeup bag itself, which is this fun lemon pattern. This is a Baggu bag, by the way, which I just love their patterns. Their illustrations are so gorgeous to me. It would be a dream to see my illustration on their bags. Anyway, I think I love using markers like this so much because it brings me back to my childhood and colouring in, and I feel like this is a grown-up version of colouring in books. I also just realised that I may get questions on this sketchbook. This is a Leuchtturm sketchbook, which definitely is not made for alcohol markers. It will bleed, but I really don't care about that too much. I like the paper, and I find that when I do sketchbook art with paper that isn't super precious or made for the medium that I'm using, it lowers the pressure somehow. Here I'm doing a second layer of that same green, so I block in shadows and continue with that fabric texture, and I do the same with the lemons. I do the first layer, then in certain areas I go over to deepen the color, and again using the same color. Here is a perfect example where I should have waited more for that first layer to dry before adding the second layer because it was bleeding a bit and I didn't get that crisp definition. I then went in with a darker yellow to deepen some of those shadows on the lemons, and I think I did this because I couldn't get that definition with that first yellow that I was trying to get, kind of that layer definition effect, so that's why I did that. Something I hear a lot is about how to get rid of streakiness when using markers, which, as you can see here, there's a lot of streakiness. Usually with 2 layers of markers, that streakiness resolves itself, it dries and then you don't see it anymore. But don't feel the need to keep layering the same color to get rid of that streakiness, because you're going to oversaturate the paper, and if you oversaturate it, then you won't be able to layer more colors on top. As the marker dries, the streakiness disappears. That and the combination of adding a few different layers to build out the illustration helps really get rid of any streakiness, and you'll see by the end of this you can hardly see any streakiness at all. So yeah, don't worry about streakiness and don't be impatient. Wait for it to dry and keep building, and you'll see that it disappears by itself. I also love using acrylic markers or gel pens to add any details on top, like highlights or text detail onto the illustration, like I'm doing here. I mainly use white throughout this spread as an acrylic marker or gel pen, but having other colors is also really handy for other final details. This tube of sunscreen is a really fun one to do. I've illustrated it before. I've also done illustrations of tubes of paint, and I love the texture of the metallic tube folds and the play of shadow and light that you get because of the folds. So for the tube itself, I actually only use 2 colors, and I build out the areas that need to be darkened by layering the marker a few times. I also make sure to leave some of the white of the page coming through for that shiny highlight effect. When I first picked up markers years ago, I struggled with them so much because I used to be so fixated on blending, and I would watch tutorials on how to blend markers and I couldn't quite get it. Like sometimes it would work for me and then other times it wouldn't work like I wanted it to. And I think simplifying my process, like embracing the texture of markers, so not caring if you could see the individual strokes, and also focusing more on the vibe of the illustration versus achieving realism or perfect color replication, really helped me with enjoying the process. My overall philosophy with creating is that the process is the part that has to feel good. If you spend hours doing something that feels bad or boring, even if you like the final result, you won't want to engage in the process again. I've been thinking about that a lot recently because I have such limited time to create right now, and I have these big creative goals that have very tangible outcomes, but the reality is that I don't have a ton of time to pour into these goals. So I want to spend my time in engaging in creativity where the process feels good. So if I spend an hour or 2 doing a few sketchbook illustrations or little paintings, I want that time to feel fun. And so process is everything to me. So if you are also in a spot where you're struggling with markers, or how to blend them or what style to use them in, focus more on what process would feel fun to you right now. Maybe it's doing more of those flat single washes of color, or maybe it's just doing more abstract patterns. Whatever it is, it needs to bring you joy while you're doing it. And here I'm just adding those final details that pull everything together with the fine liner pen. And I also use that white acrylic marker to clean up any colors that have gone outside the lines, which I think is a great use for them too. Okay, here is a summary of my top tip with markers. So if you can only watch this portion of the video, hopefully this is the most useful. So pastel colors are the best investment you're going to make with alcohol markers. You can layer them and build depth. Pastel colors are my most used, and I hardly ever touch the brighter marker colors. Make sure to swatch your colors on the paper you will be using them so you can see how they dry and what they look like on the specific paper you're using. Pick 2 to 3 colors from your reference that you want to work with. Less is more. I swatch more colors than I actually use in these illustrations. And that leads me to my next point, which is don't obsess over getting the perfect colors from your references. Simplicity is key, and you can build a cool illustration using just a few markers. The minute you introduce lots of colors or start looking for the exact matches to the reference, your end result may look messy and less cohesive. If depth and dimension is your goal with markers instead of that more flat look, which it can also look really cool, but if depth and dimension is your goal, you can achieve that by layering the same color. Layering the same color will add shadows to your illustrations, which is what gives the depth and dimension. Blending is obviously a style with markers. I personally don't love blending, so my tip around this is don't be discouraged if you can't blend. You really don't need to, as I've hopefully shown you in this video. My final tip is get some good acrylic markers or gel pens so that you can add details and highlights on top of your alcohol marker illustrations. I hope this video has been useful. Let me know if you had any questions in the comments below, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.